the case of the fire moons, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, we've got people who are combustible, expressive, and easily bored. The fire moons don't like limitations, and they seek to vitalize material reality with imagination. What crushes them more than anything is a life in which they can't be special. They need to feel that they are a child of God, a little less mortal than the mortal they are. This isn't a preference or an occasional twinge. It's a deep and abiding need. Another thing we can't forget about the fire moons is how much they enjoy the creative fire. Creativity pulls them away from the humdrum world into a state of spirit. Creativity allows the unique individual essence to come through. Don't forget, the moon is associated with motherhood and birth. Creative work requires a symbolic gestation and delivery. That's a thrilling process for the fire moons, and especially later on, it becomes their lifeblood. Now that we know what the fire moons have in common, let's look at how the moon expresses itself in each fire sign. People born when the moon is moving through the constellation of Aries are assertive and tend to have a lot of energy. They like competition because winning means they have strength, and that makes them feel safe and secure. Confidence is incredibly important to this moon. They have an eager quality, and they tend to live in the present. The moon also shows what we feel nurtured by and how we nurture. And since Aries is focused on action, they think that if you love someone, you do things for them. You defend them. You make sure they have the right equipment. You advise them. You lead the way. The moon speaks to our emotional reactions as well. The Aries moon tends to react quickly, and anger will usually be their first emotion in times of stress. This moon can be brusque, and it can feel hot and cold. In other words, it has a tempestuous temperament. Aries needs a big life, but they like to do that through rescuing others, showing their grit for the benefit of the weaker and less powerful. They love to slay the dragon, rescue the maiden, and save the village. They're very sensitive to how vibrant a situation is. When they find life monotonous, they're overcome by a drive to impregnate it and animate it with fire and imagination. It approaches each moment with the attitude that things will probably need to be livened up, and they are the ones to do it. The fire signs are egoic, and when any planet is in a fire sign, it's always in danger of becoming overly inflated. We find the same thing here. The irritating side of the Aries moon is the person who decides you need rescuing. They haven't seen a damsel strapped to a train track in a while, so they act as if you're one, that you're strapped down and don't even know it. I have a friend with an Aries moon. Interesting, very creative man. But out of the blue, and always with just a very little bit of knowledge about the situation, he'll become concerned about me, and he hopes I know what I'm doing with that and that I don't end up getting hurt, and do I know what I'm getting myself into? I don't know. Each moon has a quirk, and this is Aries. But putting up with the condescension is worth the trouble, because they're a wonderful ally, and just one of them can get a lot done. The moon in Leo does everything it does for the praise of the audience, even if it's an audience of one. The fairy tale they like is one in which they're king. They want a colorful world of grand figures and sweeping powers, so they can feel pretty crappy about having to focus on the banal, like standing in line to get your oil changed or paying the bills. They hate drudgery and love theatrics. They tend to think they're brilliant and talented and gifted, a favorite child of the gods. This trait can, of course, become aberrant, but I've also known the Leo moon to be very bold in what it thinks it can do. And I've never met one who didn't openly admit this. To them, it only makes sense. If you're not going to attempt to be special, why be here at all? They're usually fantastic storytellers because stories can be performed and because they don't consist of everything that happened, only the interesting things that happened. Leo would like life to be that way. They energize the moment. That's a gift this moon can give. In fact, they love to contribute to the lives of others. If they can provide just the right thing that really makes a difference at just the right moment they're in. Another way Leo likes to give is by being playful. They like to bring in the humor, the riddle, the wry way of putting something. I've never seen a Leo moon who wasn't good at recreation and who didn't understand its place and power. This moon has a vivid and dramatic emotional nature. So the temperament is an artistic one. You can't stop a lion from roaring, and you can't stop a Leo moon from taking center stage and monopolizing the limelight. Attention, especially positive attention, means a lot to them. Of course, this makes them vulnerable to flattery and, of course, arrogance. There's always a potential for narcissism because the ego is so prominent. They're incredibly proud of earning applause and are deeply fulfilled by a life in which they did what they said they were going to do, and they did it well. You can imagine that a Leo moon can't tolerate being a flop. And they don't have to be a flop because they're often magnetic and have a certain sparkle to them. They can be childish, no question about that. But the inner child stays around in the Leo moon long after many of the other moons think they've outgrown theirs. And it is this inner child that makes them shine so bright. They feel an enormous amount of safety in that shine. The Sag moon is synonymous with adventure. It's enthusiastic and exuberant. However, it's a little more complicated than the other fire moons. They're pure beast. Sag, the centaur, is only half beast. The rest is human. So Sag brings in an intellectual dynamic, thinking, learning, and teaching. It seeks meaning in the cosmos, so it creates a philosophy in which to live. Commitments aren't this moon's favorite thing, and that's because it's obsessed with freedom. They want to own little so they can pick up and go when the urge hits. They love learning new cultures, and since the moon represents bodily needs, when the moon is in Sag, we find someone who is nourished in more ways than one by foreign cuisine. They're also the ones to talk at length to the guy from Uzbekistan with wide-eyed wonder about how people live on the other side of the globe. Xenophobic Sag is not. Traveling the world unfettered is about as good as it gets. However, That brings us to the core of the trouble. If the moon represents connection and Sag has a deep love for freedom, we end up with a moon that asks, how can I stay connected and yet be free? The Sag moon who finds an answer to this question is 100 times happier than the one who doesn't. Likewise, the moon itself is fond of putting down roots. It wants to stay in one place and make a home unless it's in Sagittarius. Then it just wants to be a citizen of Earth. And if you try to force it into the soil, you end up with an angry snapdragon that's stomping all over everything to get out the greenhouse door. As a visionary who infuses life with color, Sag finds it easy to idealize the past, its childhood, and its mother, rather than getting mortal about it and delving into emotional pain. I've found this moon to nurture with philosophy and by giving ideas and providing alternate ways of thinking about things. Most of all, it likes to share wisdom. But there's a feature to Sag that I don't see in any other moon. It can actually be damaged by long-term boredom, especially when it happens during childhood, when there's no real control over the environment. This wound can be significant. It can have drained the life force and reduced Sag's optimism and their belief in themselves. The fire moons are born with an instinct to give life a boost, to superimpose a mythic dimension onto it. If not, they shrivel up and die. If you have a child with a fire moon, know that they must be given reasonable credit for imagining that life is bigger, better, and more dramatic than it really is. If they aren't nurtured in this way, they can start having fantasies that really are split off from reality. And in that fractured existence, they are the best, the brightest, the most talented, and the smartest. Too bad all the simpletons around them can't see it. Even a healthy fire moon is still in flames, so a container is needed for all that heat and energy. The most natural thing for them is following a passion. Some form of creative self-expression is usually appropriate so that the unique and special inner voice of which the fire moons are so aware can come through. Thank you for watching Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk, the Fire Moons. I'm Joy. More videos to come.